Welcome to the Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by artificial intelligence, I, for one, welcome the new robot overlords. Let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome, everybody, to the Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Ishiguro. When the munchies hit, pour a bowl of Ishiguro. Welcome, everyone, to the Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers. Todd's a full-time producer. Wes. It's funny. People probably can't distinguish us after the first 30 seconds. We probably just sound like the same white male talking into a microphone after a certain point. They're like, why does this voice keep talking to itself? Yeah.
You think? Really? Do we sound that similar?
I don't know if we sound that similar, but it's probably hard to distinguish because we're not that distinctive. I don't think. I don't know.
Are you saying all white guys sound the same? Is that what you're saying? We all have this same gray matter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well done.
Threw it back.
Way back. Speaking of, hopefully we have someone from that little short film, Office Zombies, on next week, but TBD on that.
We'll share that in the show notes. You got to share that.
Yeah.
I watched it recently and it was fantastic.
Dude, it's still funny. Like, I don't, like to watch my work that often. But when I revisit that, it tickles me. And I think it's everyone else in there, right? Aaron is so freaking good. You're great. And that's the fun of making things, right? Like you move on, you reflect back, and I feel like everyone has that experience whenever you make something. And then you revisit it a week later, a year later, however long. And then you're like, where did that come from? Like, did I do that? I had those thoughts. I put that together. Because those moments of intense focus when you're creating something, you do kind of go into this other place, this Zen state where you're so dialed in that it's almost like you're, whatever, to paraphrase a popular show, you're mainlining the universe. And that's how it feels. Like you're just connected with everything, and there's this quantum entanglement happening between you and whatever freaking Jupiter and the person next door, and you're just vibing into all of that, and you just pour all that into whatever, a painting or a prose, a poem, and it just makes sense in that moment. And when you come back and revisit it, and you're like, I don't know who did that, but man, that's really cool. Those are really good moments, aren't they?
Yeah. This kind of, it's amazing we're having this conversation actually right now, because I've been trying to think, everybody says, I'm going to take this out to the outer limits, and then I'm going to pull it back in. Everybody says, oh, social media is the devil, or like, I think that. I think that social media is terrible. But I've been thinking lately, like, why do I think that? And I haven't been able to come to an answer until probably right now, which is when I tap into those moments that you're talking about, I feel like, well, I was going to say the world, but the universe, like, because you referenced the universe shrinks down into a singularity. And the smaller my focus is, the more narrow my focus is, the smaller the universe is. And the narrower I can get my focus, the happier I am. Right? You're never happier than when you are tapped into that feeling of, this is my purpose, and I am solely focused on this one thing. And everything else goes away. The entire universe goes away. It doesn't matter you're on a speck of dust in the middle of, this endless void. It doesn't matter that, there are 8 billion people on the earth, and you think that 7.95 billion of them are better than you at something. That none of that matters. Doesn't matter. Nothing matters. All that matters is this one little thing, and you're never any happier than that moment, usually, right? So the smaller the world is, the happier you are, therefore. And what does social media do? It makes the world seem gigantic. It makes it seem like, because this endless scrolling, you'll never get to the end of it. And there's always something that hooks you. And this is, a video of a beautiful woman swimming in in France on a sunny morning or sipping coffee, and you're, you know, in your little room trying to write something that sparks something in your heart, like, but you can't come up with something. And so you feel like total dog crap. It is a reminder of how big things are. So when you shrink everything down to this narrow focus, all of a sudden you're happy. Everything else falls away. Your worries fall away for just an instant. And then you try to hold on to that. And it's that hit that, you know, if you want to call it a drug, that we all chase. We're all chasing that rabbit to try to get back to those moments, or to hold on to those moments when they hit, and then remember what that feels like. It's yes, that's fantastic opening to this spot.
Dude, that's dope. Yeah, I think at some point, probably like 8 years ago, I just made a decision. It might even be a couple years before that, where I just noticed I got so focused on notifications popping up on my phone, I just turned 99% of them off. And so for me, and I know a lot of people, you know, have very strong feelings about social media. I do too, in a sense of I hate what it's done to a lot of, you know, people. But for me, it's become a tool where I engage it when I want to engage it. And so sometimes I might not be on for a couple days, and sometimes I'm, you know, a few times in a day, but it's always when I want to. And so like my mornings don't get interrupted, by checking what's happening, or, you know, what messages have I gotten. It's like, I'm going to read a book. I'm going to have my breakfast. I'm going to do some voiceover stuff, do some stretching, have breakfast, and read a book. And I go, as you know, like I'll read 20, 30 books a year. And I'm just now realizing in this conversation, I wasn't able to do that until I got all my notifications, not all, but like minimum. Like if I get an email, it's a relevant email. And that pops up. If I get a notification from Instagram, it's a relevant Instagram, you know, it's going to be from you or from Scott or from someone that, it's never going to be something that's like, oh, here's a Facebook comment or whatever. Like I delete all that and silence all that stuff because I don't care. Protecting that time is when I was finally able to start building out long moments of focus, which is what you need when you read a book. It's so hard to sit and read a book when you're thinking about, did that person respond to me yet? Never going to happen. Your brain is too not present. And it wasn't until I made a point of doing that I'm just now realizing that I was able to start reading, you know, 10 and then 20 and then 30 books a year, consistently, you know, for year over year. Not just a one-time go, but like I enjoy it and I read in my leisure time just as well. But I start my day with a book so that I feel like if I did nothing else today, you know what, I did a chapter. And I trained my mind a little bit more in the same way that I train my body. Like you and I work out like we're fiends. We hit the gym anywhere from 5 to 7 days a week. And that takes time and dedication and focus. And if you're not used to making yourself do things you don't want to do, it's going to be hard to accomplish all your other goals, I think. And so I don't know. I mean, it's one perspective. It's not the only one, but that's my approach. And I completely agree. Like social media is dicey, but it can be a good tool when we want to rein it in, I guess. Yeah, I don't have a good segue out of that.
No, that's fine.
But yeah, what are we covering today, man?
Today we're covering Stranger Than Fiction. So if you haven't seen this film, please pause this episode and go watch it because we're going to spoil a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, we're going to do it all. We're going to look at some of the cinematography. I like the opening infinite zoom, as well as the way they lightly tell story through shadows, and I will flesh that out. And some of you will roll your eyes at me, but a few of you will be like, oh, that's really cool. And as well as a lot of the story and writing, we'll talk about rule of repeats, the naming conventions, the ticking clock, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. I.R.S. auditor Harold Crick suddenly finds his mundane Chicago life to be the subject of narration only he can hear. Narration that begins to affect his entire existence, from his work to his love life to his death. Directed by Marc Forster, written by Zach Helm, cinematography by Roberto Schaefer, featuring Will Ferrell as Harold Crick, Emma Thompson as Karen Eiffel, Maggie Gyllenhaal as Anna Pascal, Queen Latifah as Penny Escher, and Dustin Hoffman as Professor Hilbert.
Question 1. Has anyone recently left any gifts outside your home? Anything, gum, money, a large wooden horse?
I'm sorry?
Just answer the question.
No.
Okay. Do you find yourself inclined to solve murder mysteries in large, luxurious homes to which you... Let me finish. To which you may or may not have been invited?
No.
Right. On a scale of 1 to 10, what would you consider the likelihood you might be assassinated?
Assassinated?
1 being very unlikely, 10 being expecting it around every corner.
I have no idea.
Okay, let me rephrase. Are you the king of anything?
Like what?
Anything. King of the lanes at the local bowling alley.
King of the lanes?
King of the lanes, king of the trolls.
King of the trolls?
Yes, a clandestine land found underneath your floorboards. Anything.
No.
Huh?
No. It's ridiculous.
Agreed. But let's start at ridiculous and move backwards. Now, was any part of you at one time part of something else?
Like, do I have someone else's arms?
Well, is it possible at one time that you were made of stone, wood, lye, buried corpse parts, or earth made holy by rabbinical elders?
No, look. I'm sorry, but what do these questions have to do with anything?
Nothing. The only way to find out what story you're in is to determine what stories you're not in. Odd as it may seem, I've just ruled out half of Greek literature, 7 fairy tales, 10 Chinese fables, and determined conclusively that you are not King Hamlet, Scout Finch, Miss Marple, Frankenstein's monster, or a golem. Aren't you relieved to know you're not a golem?
Yes, I am relieved to know that I'm not a golem.
Good. Do you have magical powers?
That's a perfect way to end that.
What a great scene. I mean, all the scene work is pretty fantastic. Dude, Stranger Than Fiction, it's a pretty under the radar film. I've never really heard anyone talk about this film seriously, much less kind of bring it up in casual conversation. What do you make of it? What do you make of it, Todd?
I mean, it's like one of my favorite Will Ferrell films, honestly. I mean, anytime you have a comedic actor who can pull off something dramatic, and even if it's somewhat dramatic, because I think that there's still, like, you cannot see Will Ferrell on screen and not be amused, right? So there's always, even in the serious moments, there's always some element of amusement, right? Even when he's playing the guitar and has Anna, whatever you want to call her, has that moment where she like basically falls in love with him, and we're kind of falling in love with him too as a character, in that moment. There's still this element of, I know that's Will Ferrell, and I'm smiling, even if it's on the inside. Anytime you can have someone like that pulling off, an emotional response from you is just awesome. You love seeing these iconic actors taking what they do best and moving it into another realm. And I think he does that flawlessly in this film. The way it's shot is fantastic. I mean, this film is a great example of mood setting with light. The scene where my favorite scene in the whole film is where she makes him cookies. And she's talking, and honestly, like, the sound mix is fantastic too. And it's there's this moment where she's trying to convince him to bite the cookie. Just dip it in the milk and take a bite of the cookie. And the way she says cookie, the mix of the capture of that sound and the way that it's mixed and the setting with it, the kitchen, which is shut down, the lighting is off. There's still a little bit of lighting, but it's dark in the kitchen. She's done for the day. There's more light where they're kind of out in the place where all the tables are, but it's still kind of dark. It's obviously dark outside. The signage is off. It's just, you don't really know what's going to happen, but you know that the day is done and it's just them two. And they do that all with just lighting. So, and I have that feeling. And then the way that Maggie Gyllenhaal delivers those lines is with this just, she's inviting him. The way that she's speaking to him, she doesn't like that she likes him. She doesn't like it, and she doesn't like herself for having made the cookies for him, but she doesn't care. She's putting it out there, and then his delivery on when him saying that he blew it out loud to her, like his realization of, oh, you made those cookies for me and I blew it, and him saying, because we know that as the viewer, we know that he ruined that moment. And instead of him just leaving and us feeling that he ruined that moment and thinking, I wonder if he knows that he ruined that moment, he's saying it out loud to her and to us. I recognize you as the one who made the cookies, and I also recognize you as the viewer and what you're feeling. You're feeling like, God dang it, you blew it. I'm recognizing that by saying out loud, I blew it, didn't I? It's a fantastic scene from beginning to end. And I love that he leaves and they stay apart. He doesn't fix the moment at all. That moment's gone. It's done. I'm leaving now.
In fact, he highlights it by saying,
Yes.
This isn't going to make sense to you, but I think I'm in a tragedy. And
Tragedy.
As he's saying that, he's marking his book, and we see that it's just filled with tragic.
It's such an important scene to me because it also establishes that, because she's hated him this whole time. She's hated him. She's treated him like dirt. And we're establishing that no, she doesn't hate him. There's something that she cares, that she likes about him. We don't know what it is yet, and that's fine. But there's something that she likes about him, and she's inviting him in. And he has a wall that all of a sudden is being broken, a wall of like, his tie and his suit and his IRS agent wall that all of a sudden he sees. Like he's seen it, but it's always been there, and there's nothing that will breach this wall. And all of a sudden, the wall is breached in that scene, and it changes everything after that. And yes, he realizes he's in a tragedy, but that's not the biggest thing for me. The biggest thing for me is her wall is broken down, and we see it. She's allowed it broken down, and his wall is broken down, and he's kind of like come to an understanding that there was a wall there in the first place and is okay with that.
That's so good, because their walls come down for effectively, the same reason, which was she tried a two-pronged approach to get something out of this guy. The first one was frustrating him. She spent the whole day making his life miserable. She shoved him in this back room next to the bathroom with a box full of unorganized papers, which is his nightmare. And then what does he do? His wall is up. He doesn't respond. He doesn't give her anything. He doesn't give her anger, which is what she wants. But he also doesn't break and get sad. And then she's like, okay, I have one other tool, and this is my big tool. Cooking. This is it. This is my big weapon, but it's not a weapon I use out of malevolence. I'm going to use it out of love. And I'm, okay, you know what? If he can take all that, fine. I'll give him some love, something personal. For him to not react to that, now she's broken him. And it's through recognizing that she's broken that he finally is like breaking himself. That's really cool. That's a really cool dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful scene that I think looks beautiful and sounds beautiful too. With, I can't remember if there's music or not. Maybe the absence of music. I don't remember. It doesn't even matter. That's the point.
Yeah, that's right.
It doesn't even matter. It didn't need it. If it's there, it doesn't need it. But I also love the music in this film too. I think it's all over the place. It's a great example of like, we talk about motifs here on a lot of these films, but it's a great example of not needing one. I mean, in one scene we have piano as the main instrument. Another scene we got maybe like a flute or a violin. Another scene we might have, a guitar. Like it's all over the place. There is no real rhyme or reason, and I think it totally works. It's just whatever, they felt like in that moment. And it also is, it's supportive of that scene and the feeling that we want to make, but it doesn't have to be a piano all the time, yeah. Anyway, I think it's great.
100%. And another use of the music that is just fantastic, is part of the humor, right? So the comedy of Will Ferrell is so phenomenal here because he's not doing Will Ferrell stuff.
Yeah.
And to your point, because of who he is and what we know about him, we bring a lot of feelings into this movie, and it makes us want to laugh, even though he's doing absolutely nothing. And to that point, when he actually starts kind of acting funny, right? The moment where he gets really frustrated, he goes home, he starts flipping out at his apartment. He's trying to trigger the voice, and he's brushing his teeth. Harold counted his 32 teeth 76 times.
Yeah.
And, he's like, Harold is flinging the lamp furiously at the floor and he's stamping on it. And it starts out really funny, but the music corrects us because it introduces sadness. And now instead of laughing at Will Ferrell, we're kind of crying at Will Ferrell, which is a beautiful use of music to correct the tone of the scene, to let it be funny for a moment before it goes on too long and it becomes sad. And a lot of
just like that,
drop of a hat, and it turns so quick, and we go with it because we recognize what it's pointing out, and it's so beautiful. It's a really incredible, composition. Because his humor is coming from all his lack of emotion, because this guy is a blank canvas, right? He's a white page that is yet to be typed on. And so everything that's happening around him is what the typing is where all the shading and the context, creates some sense of reaction from the audience. Even his apartment, right, is shades of beige. There's nothing interesting about this guy. His HUD is white, right? Even this really cool looking HUD has no color to it. And to that end, him having a really awful bad day is hilarious, right? Him getting booed by strangers. Get bent, tax man. Boo! And everyone in the place starts booing him. And it's really funny because he's not really reacting. He doesn't even feel necessarily bad. He's like, oh, this again. It's so good and so funny. And it comes out of his lack of, portrayal. And it's just wonderful acting and writing and directing kind of all coalescing at the same time. Damn it, Todd.
It's really good. And Maggie Gyllenhaal is freaking amazing. I mean, she's an incredible actor anyway, in anything she does, but I feel every single time she's on screen what I'm supposed to feel. What, she's portraying it, whether that's anger and frustration, or it's love, or it's something in between, or like I said in that scene, it's an invitation. I feel that. That's a really hard scene to pull off because she's got to be frustrated, but she's also got to be inviting at the same time. How the heck do you do that? That is next level stuff. I'm not talking about, there are so many roles that are out there, even in really big budget films and blockbusters. I mean, think about Dune and think about Oppenheimer, where those characters, as hard as they are to play and as amazing as they are very, they're kind of like single focus, and yes, there's nuance to all of them, and I'm not taking anything away from them, but single focus. But think of this one scene where she has to take two feelings, maybe multiple feelings, maybe even more than that, and put them both together in a single shot, in a single look. The way she's looking at him has to be with disdain and love at the same time. I don't know how you do that, but she did it. Yeah, fantastic. She's
amazing. Her and Dustin Hoffman provide almost all of the color in the film.
Yeah.
Dustin Hoffman is amazing in the way he's adding so much humor through his dry tone, is just pro level.
It's amazing.
And Maggie, it's all life. She is all the life of the film. And without her, this becomes a really brutal kind of story to participate in. But you can see why they're drawn to each other. It's so good. Them doing their scene work together is really, really magical, because of how broken he looks. Once you introduce her, you can see how rough he's at it, especially this little story about the cookies. You're like, your mom never baked you cookies? And he's like, well, no, they were store-bought ones. She's like, oh God. Like, that's such a great scene that provides so much, not just in the writing, but his delivery and then her reaction to it, acting is reacting. And yeah, this might be my favorite role she's done as well. I would have to go back through. She's done a lot of good stuff, so I don't want to, for sure say that. I feel very confident that this is my favorite Will Ferrell. I don't really love all the other shticky stuff. Like, I got burned out really fast on that. I watched Anchorman probably twice, and I watched Talladega once, and I was like, okay, I'm fine. Haha, yes, I get it. I'll quote along with everyone else, but I really don't want to sit through those movies anymore. And whereas this, you could probably cue this up, every month or two, and I'm going to have a really amazing time because he is such a talented actor. If you go back and watch even something like Melinda and Melinda, it's really fun. He's being more funny in that one, but you can see more of his skill as, a dramatic actor kind of poke through the surface. And maybe he just doesn't enjoy those roles. I imagine he can get a lot of more variety than he does, but I respect, that everyone recognized this can only be played by one person. Like, as good as so many other actors are, we need him. Like, I think the only other actor I could see playing this role to the extent and talent that Will Ferrell did would be like Philip Seymour Hoffman. I could see him coming in and nailing this, but I don't know that I would trust this role to anyone else. And he would still be second fiddle to what Will Ferrell was doing because of the natural humor that he brings. Dude, God. Yeah, I will run through a couple of notes because, I love this movie. This is just a joy because of the kind of meta conversation that's happening and the impossible task that they set up for themselves. Like, tell a story where you make people aware of the writing of the story, and then confound everyone with your ending, or at least make it feel right. Like, there's a million booby traps that you lay for yourselves when you tackle this story, which is a really old kind of trope, right? Of the writer writes some fiction that becomes reality. That's a fun, what I think of as a Stephen King trope, but probably was done way before him. And they pulled it off with, a plume. Like, it's so good. But I'll start with the cinematography. That opening shot is sick, where we start at the Earth from space, and then we just quickly zoom in, and we keep zooming seamlessly until we hit Harold's watch. I love that. And what I assume is it's probably a lot of still images that are stitched together with a little light animation here and there to give it that sense of video. And that's cool. And to me, this maybe inspired the Limitless zoom. If you've watched Limitless, it has that similar effect, which is a whole new level because that is definitely video. And I've recreated that poorly, on my own as a test. As one of the tests I was trying to come up with one of your music videos a long time ago. And I was like, I wonder if I could, and then we could stage things. And no, that mess was horrid. But it's just a wonderful introduction of, like, I think thematically you're getting this God's eye view of the world. And in this story, Karen Eiffel is God. And we're going from her view as she starts telling the story until we hit the watch. And the watch, of course, is how we also end the movie, right? With the drawn onto the cast. So it's our first frame and our last frame. And it's a story about how a watch saved Harold Crick, which is a really nice button, because when you start introducing an animated watch with a personality and feelings, you need to find a way to not forget that by the time you get to the end of your story. It has to feel cohesive. And it is. And that's kind of the cohesion they give it, is it saved his life through inserting itself. Anyway, so there's another little camera work thing that I like, which is on the bus. Whenever the first time they have any chemistry together, is she accidentally bumps into him on the bus. And the camera work is all over the place because the bus is broken into that little accordion. I don't know what you call that. Extended bus, right? And it just allows the camera to constantly shift around so that it makes sense. I'm sure they're adding some camera movement, But even if they're not, it makes sense why it's happening because of the nature of the bus. But what I like about it is it creates an uncertainty of where the scene is going. Like, are we together? Are they vibing? Are they enemies? And we're just all over the place, and it's wonderful. My favorite, though, is the use of cucoloris. And what they do is they throw some textured shadows on Anna, like twice. And it's both times whenever she's walking home, right? He gives her flowers, quote unquote flowers, which took me 2 viewings to understand what that meant. I'm sorry. You have to excuse my friend. He's a little slow. It's, a pun, right? Instead of bringing her flowers, he brings her different types of flour, barley flour and whatever, wheat flour. And he's got them all bagged up. And for a while I was like, why did he bag up these flowers? I didn't understand that it was like ground flour. Sorry. And so, but it's after they walk home, they're standing outside of her, whatever that is, brownstone. And she's standing out there and she's got these shadows on her face. And then he doesn't, right? And part of me is like, you know what? We don't really know what she's thinking. Is she connecting with him? Is she not? And so adding all those extra shadowy textures creates that feeling of uncertainty, and it's motivated by the big tree standing right in front, right next to them. Whereas he doesn't, right? He has no interesting textures on Harold's face. He's very transparent. He wants her, but we don't know how she feels. Does she want him? And we think we know, but we're not 100% sure where the scene is going. And then you get to the inside at dinner, the immediate next scene, and she's got all these textures still on her face, right? From the chandelier, and it's shifting and moving around as she walks around it. And it's really nice. Before I get to why I think that's cool, let's look at Miss Pascal herself, right? She's an idealist. She doesn't want to fund wars or corporate greed and is going to protest all that through taxes. Genius. And she calculated it to be 22% of our budget goes to these nefarious means. And she went to law school, the best one, right? Harvard Law. And therefore, she knows what will happen if she doesn't pay taxes. She's not an idiot. This is exactly part of her plan. And she became a baker because she wants to change the world through cookies. And that's really, really cool. Now, the way you create those shadows, those shapes on your face, is often, not always, but often through the use of cucoloris. It's a thing that you put on a gobo, or sometimes you call it the gobo itself. It's a go-between between whatever the light and your subject that casts these shadows. And so you can create the feeling of branches. Now, sometimes you can't actually just use freaking branches, and they do. They attach it to a C-stand and shoot the light through the branches, and now you have some nice looking branchy shadows. But depending on the branch, right, it can get a little muddy and it just doesn't look like anything. Whereas the cucoloris can really create a nice distinctive shadow with some nice soft edges depending on how close or far you put it from the light. Now, what do you call a cucoloris? For short, it's called a cookie. And so I think it's really, really funny and also really, really nerdy, but super cool to use a cookie on the only person in this film that I picked out was that they use it on Miss Pascal, who wants to change the world through cookies. And I just think that's such a fun pun and maybe something that the gaffer on their own was just like, I'm going to do this because this is really funny. Maybe it's the DP, maybe the director stepped in and said, hey, let's do this. But they also had to pick the moment where it made the most motivated sense. And there was only 2 of those. And they just said, you know what, for these 2 little moments, let's use some cookies. And that way, it's just a little inside joke. But I love it. I think I would bet that it was very intentional for that very specific reason. Because why not? Why not?
Yeah.
And it kind of tells the story through her shadows along the way. Yeah. That's nerdy
awesome.
As all hell.
I never would have noticed that ever in a million years.
I enjoy little things like that. On the story and writing level, there is the rule of repeats that I think is happening a lot in the film, but the two that I kind of picked out were the very beginning, right? We watch Harold go through a normal day with the voiceover, kind of narrating everything that he's doing. And then we immediately start going through the day again. And now he's hearing the VO and everything changes. The rule of repeats is what I term whenever you show the same thing twice, you can't show it the same exact way. Both times you have to change something. You have to break it. And so if someone tells you a plan, like, yeah, we're going to rob, the jewelry store and, we're going to do this, this, and this. Well, you've kind of experienced what the plan is already. And so whenever you go to actually execute the plan, change it all. Everything goes haywire. Or, someone goes and robs the jewelry store once and they're going to do it again. Then you change it that time. And so anytime you introduce or go through the motions in some way or another of a thing, you have to change it the second time and break expectation. And that's how you set up a story beat, is by introducing the normal way and then the abnormal way. Or that's also how you can introduce luck, is by showing someone be unlucky. Every time they start the car, it doesn't start. And they have to go through this, oh, finally it started, in the magic moment when you needed to. You can introduce luck that way as well, by breaking these repeated rules. And that's nice. The other rule and this is much looser, but he meets a professional and he's telling her his story about hearing voices. And she's like, oh, you're a schizophrenic. And he's like, no. The voices don't hear me. They're talking about me, not to me. She's like, I think that still counts. And of course, we later on meet what's probably a schizophrenic guy. And that's an interesting little, I won't go down that rabbit hole, but that's a fascinating aspect to me. But he does meet another professional. And this guy takes him seriously. And so you kind of need to meet someone who is discounting him, or else your world loses some of its credibility. We need to feel like this is a real world for this story to really have, the grounded cohesion that you want by the time you get to the end of it. And so you meet the one professional who thinks he's, mentally ill. And then you meet another professional who takes him very seriously. And I love the way we meet that guy. Because when we do, did I not? Oh yeah. We meet Professor Hilbert. And I love it because we start by going into a bathroom, right? Where he's drinking coffee, while he's taking a leak and having a conversation about a guy who's experiencing the life of a character in a novel. And of course, this guy's a little kooky himself, which is really nice. And then we go sit out in the coffee machine, and he's getting coffee after coffee after coffee, right? He just finished a coffee while using the bathroom, and now he's getting another coffee, and then immediately goes into his office, has another coffee. He pours himself a cup of coffee.
Man after my own heart.
Yeah, he really is. And I love that because you could do none of that and it would be fine. The story would still work if you just sat in this guy's office and had the conversations. Because that's really all that's happening. It's just a bunch of exposition that's happening. But it's so much more entertaining and revealing of character and why this guy, why you think, yeah, I kind of buy this guy being a little, nutty and taking Harold Crick seriously. Because look at him. Look at this guy. He's not taking himself seriously. And that's cool. That's a really much more interesting way to go about this character who you really need to ground in some way. And that's really nice. But there is something other in the writing that's happening that does it count? Does it not? It counts to me as a writer looking at this and looking for inspiration, which is the naming conventions. Anna Pascal, I think, is named after Blaise Pascal, who was a mathematician. Hilbert, Professor Hilbert, is named after, I think, David Hilbert, who was a mathematician. Karen Eiffel, who you would assume is named after Gustav Eiffel, the designer of the Eiffel Tower, who was an engineer, right? And if Eiffel is the author of the book that Harold is living out. She's the engineer of his story. And then you have Penny Escher is how she introduces herself, has kind of a double whammy, I think, right? Penny, like the old adage, if you tossed a penny from a tall building, it could kill a person. And named after also Escher, who was an artist who used mathematics for his art. And so there's still this mathematical, and that's a really cool name because you're combining the mathematical side with the artistic side, which is what her character is literally trying to do. She's trying to create some form of analytical art to help Eiffel finish her story. And then, of course, you have Harold Crick himself. And this one might be the coolest one of all, which is, I think, probably named after Francis Crick, who co-discovered the double helix of DNA. And his DNA is kind of the whole element of what the story is all about. It's analyzing his life under a microscope and putting him to the test. And so he has this double, sided story kind of coming up and coming down about his life and the realization of his life and what it's adding up to and what it's not adding up to. Is he living out his life or not? No, he's not. And so I like that also because there's a sense of symmetry that I think they're trying to introduce into the story. The double helix giving one sense of symmetry, but they also use the number 22 in a lot, right? 22% of her taxes aren't paid, or they use the number 22 in everywhere in a lot of the set decoration. Numbers on the background posters and what's his name's the professor's office, right? They also have 22 on the office building number. It's all over the place. I'm sure if I sat and really looked, I'd find it in a dozen other places. But so that's one kind of symmetry, right? The palindromic nature of 2-2. And then also Eiffel. There's another kind of symmetry that they're doing here, which was Eiffel writes the ending of her story on a legal pad while on the bus ride home to her office. And then, of course, Harold himself reads her book on his bus ride home. And so there's all kinds of little symmetrical things that they're doing throughout the story. And even halfway through the film is when he finds out who she is, right? That's when he's in her office. That's about halfway. It's not the exact, I don't think. I don't think they were that, neurotic about the symmetry. But it introduces this whole ticking clock aspect, which is through the whole film, the first half of the film, Harold feels a ticking clock of his imminent death, right? And it's when they introduced that idea that, little did he know, is when we go and finally meet Karen Eiffel. And so him knowing that his death is imminent keeps him very motivated to figure out what's going on, which is really nice. But after meeting Karen, we realize, and therefore we know, that she doesn't know how to do it yet. He's safe. So there's tension for him, but because of the dramatic irony, as pointed out by the professor, right? We know that he's safe and therefore not in danger, and therefore everything that's happening to him is very comedic. And so we think we're living in a comedy. But it's not until the moment when he finally figures out who his author is, right? Karen Eiffel. That's exactly when she finds out how to kill Harold. And now we know he is about to die. Therefore, his tension is our tension too. His death really is imminent now. And that creates the ticking clock of, oh God, so he has a ticking clock first, which is funny for us. And then we see the clock actually start to tick. And now it's drama for us. That's such a great use of dramatic irony and foreshadowing. It's just wonderful. Like the writing in this story is just astronomically good. And it's hitting all the notes that it wants you to experience along the way. And you have a visitor. Yeah, I love the writing is really well done. It's hitting all the notes that it wants you to experience along the way. And it's doing it to create a really good experience, because comedies for me, I think, are rough because you get tired of laughing. Like at a certain point, you don't really want to laugh anymore, and it's hard to keep people laughing. Whereas it's much easier to get drama out of someone once you've had them laughing and they're tired of laughing. Well, guess what? I got another punch coming. And now you can really bring someone low and experience these lows. And it's it's so well done because whenever he allows himself to die, that's like, whoa, where is this story going to go now? That's a really great sequence because he's doing everything he can to get out of this. And she, once she meets him, is also doing everything she can to get out of this. And so it's two characters trying to talk themselves out and trying to get the world to let them out of the ending that we can't avoid. And that's a really good ending. And it's a slow trickle of buying into what needs to happen. Because first it's Harold can't do it. He goes to the professor who is an expert. He understands literature. And he reads the book and he's like, oh, no. Bro, I like you, but you got to die. It's like, what? No. And he's like, just read it. You'll understand. And Harold himself buys in. He's like, you know what? It's a good book. It deserves a good ending. And you know what? And that's okay, because at the end of the day, we're all only here briefly anyway. And this deserves a really good ending. And it's a fascinating element to introduce a writer who has to come to grips with what she's putting out in the world. Ooh, she's putting out death. She's killing people. Is that bringing anything good into the world? So she's like, you know what? Maybe my book isn't as good as it could be, but I'm putting something good into the world. I don't know. How did you feel all those build-ups and reveals?
Yeah, it is watching it this time. I've seen it, I don't know, like 3 or 4 times, probably like 4 times or whatever. And each time, I find something a little bit new, or I have maybe a new feeling. And this time, maybe just because it's fresh, the reason to me, at least this time, why he's okay with it is not for the book. It's because he knows why he dies. He dies saving a little boy. I don't care about yes, it's a good book. He said, I like your book. It needs to happen. It's not because the book needs to be out in the world to me. It's because he needs to save the little boy. And if he's not there, if he doesn't do it, the little boy could die. So, of course, I'm going to jump in front of a bus for a little boy. And that's exactly who Harold what he would do, at least at the end of the movie. At the beginning, maybe not, because I don't know. Maybe he wouldn't, because he's just so aloof and like flat and like what did you said is like vanilla? I don't know.
Yeah.
But at the end, of course he would do that. So
that's a great point because, and I'm so glad you pointed that out. It really didn't occur to me that that's the way it's going. And it makes
me either until this viewing.
But it makes so much more sense whenever you see the scene, him laid up. There's a comedy version of the line that he gives because Miss Pascal is saying, you jumped in front of a bus to save a little boy? I had to. The comedy version is that he had to because he was written to do it. And you can play into that comedy. But whenever you do what you're saying, which is he commits to the story because he has to save the little boy. He had to do that.
That was his decision. So it also, it's funny because like who's driving the ship here?
Yeah.
Is it the author or is it Harold? And that, I mean, it's both, I guess. They're making you choose who's driving the ship. And then that makes you think, is fate real? Like, is luck real? Like, are we controlling our own fate? And you like to think Harold is controlling his own fate, but then you see her typing it while it's happening and she doesn't finish the word dead. She types DE and then she stops because she can't finish it. And he's not dead. He's laying there and you hear the woman say, he's okay. It looks like he's breathing, and so he doesn't die. But does he not die because of her? But he did save the boy because of him. I don't know. I don't necessarily have that answer. Maybe, they hint at it because she doesn't finish the book in that way. She gives it a different ending. And then she has this beautiful line at the end where she's talking to the professor. She brings in the book and he's like, it's okay. And she says, I realize I've been killing, I know I kill everybody, but there's something to a man knowing, a hero knowing they're going to die, and or having the choice or whatever, and choosing to do it anyway for the greater good. That's the kind of person we want in the world. And, you know, it was such a beautiful statement, you know, like not just from his story perspective, but, you know, in the world perspective.
That's a character worth saving, I think is.
Yeah, thank you. That's the line. That's a character worth saving. Yeah. And she does. And the other wonderful thing about this is that she has, as a writer, this existential crisis after she knows that Harold is real. She has this like scene of existential crisis, knowing or like imagining that every other book she's written has killed someone. She's physically killed someone in every other book. At least that's what she thinks. She's like, if this is real, then all my other books are real, and I've just been killing all these people. You know, how can I do it again knowing that? That makes me a murderer, not a writer. And she just can't bring herself to do that. And it does make it easier for her to make that decision because Harold is he's just such a great person, you know?
And that and I mean, we really haven't talked about Emma Thompson because she is magic. Because the perverse sense of joy that she gets out of the first half of the movie of thinking about death, and she inserts herself. So it's not like I'm just thinking about killing other people. She inserts herself into those stories instead of Harold Crick, which I think is important. And she's just thinking about falling to her death or getting to a crazy traffic accident. And there's a sense of, you know, perverse joy that she's getting out of it. And when she gets to that moment of killing him, she breaks. Strong moment, full of emotion. And it's just the writing coming together with her performance. My God. Because she's been kind of holding back too, like, and seeing these unemotional characters finally give into it is really cool. And for that, I mean, everyone is really incredible because I think Queen Latifah is fantastic as well. Like, she's coming in and kind of playing the straight man, so to speak, and providing a lot of button pushing for, you know, Karen Eiffel. And everyone's just swimming in the same pool, and it's really cool to see it all kind of harmonize and sync up. But yeah, Emma Thompson, this wasn't the kind of role I imagined that she would take, just because, you know, she's a very serious actor, and seeing, you know, her dive into this story, it almost gives me a lot of comfort going into the movie. Like, this is going to be a good movie.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. You kind of comforted knowing that the quality is going to be there. Like, the quality of the story is going to be there. Yep.
Yes. Based on who's attached to it. Dustin Hoffman can be 50-50. Like, I know he picks a lot of really great projects, but, you know, he's also a fun actor. He'll go and do something silly. But I don't feel like Emma Thompson takes a lot of risks in that way. Like, she wants a character she can really dig into, and that requires really strong writing. And I'm just really impressed that this wasn't based on a book. From everything I can tell, this was just a script that Zach Helm wrote, and that's damn impressive because it feels like something based on a novel because of the depth and layered writing. Phenomenal. I don't know. That's. I think that's all I got, man.
What else has Marc Forster done?
Oh, a lot. My God.
Tell me some things.
Go look at his stuff.
Okay, I will.
Yeah.
I'm just really. What?
World War Z.
Okay. I'm just really bad with names and connecting them to things. So I have to
but he's not someone that you generally, whenever you think of like a lot of the movies that he's done, you know, you just don't think of Monsters Ball, won an Academy Award for Best Picture. Or wait, maybe not Best Picture, but it got an Oscar nomination, right? And win for Halle Berry, and a lot of critical acclaim. What else?
Gotcha.
Oh, The Kite Runner, which is phenomenal. God, it's good. Not as well known. Oh, Man Called Otto. No, I just pulled up his IMDb.
Yep.
Man Called Otto, which, you know, not my cut. Quantum of Solace. Like, he's done Stay. I think Stay has the best transitions of any movie ever made. I study that movie just for its use of transitions. Like, it's the best. If you are interested in
Wow.
like really strong transitions, you will not do better. I will die on that hill. Stay is the number one.
Ryan Gosling. I haven't seen this. I'm gonna go
Wow.
watch it.
Yeah, that's
Cool.
really, it's a solid film, but I mean, watch it, I think, for the transitions more than for the story. Performances are great, story's solid, but those
I just love the man, the camera angles and the cinematography is so good, and it's unexpectedly good in this film. The storytelling through the camera positioning and movement or lack of it is so cool. When he goes and sees the first shrink, the first psychologist,
Yeah.
it is very static. There is zero movement. We open with this wide, it's completely still. We cut into her, completely still. Cut to him, but we're behind a desk. It's like everything is locked off, hardcore, and it's so beautiful, like perfectly, lit from the top down, but the entire room is flooded with light, and it's all like white and clean and pristine. And then we go to the school with Dustin Hoffman, and there's all these browns and earth tones, and there's movement everywhere. Like you said, he's in the bathroom, like, and when we're on Harold, we're kind of static, but when we see him, it's always kind of moving back and forth. They're telling the story through camera work, and through lighting and color, and it's just so brilliant. Who's the cinematographer? Who is it?
Roberto Schaefer.
Yeah. Oh my God. Like, it's a clinic.
One of my favorite, it might be my favorite moment of the film, and it's simple, but it's so effective, which is the phone ringing. There's this little sequence, right, when she's typing out, the phone rings, period, ring. The phone rings again, period, ring. Don't answer that. And there's a nice little dramatic build, and she's looking at the phone, and then she looks down at the typewriter. The phone rings a third time. She looks at the phone, and then there's this beautiful shot of she hits period, and we rack focus and tilt up to the phone from the page, while at the exact same time the score, the composition, has this really funky riff. Whatever is happening there. And it's big, and it's right in the middle of this moment, and it opens up to let the phone ring. And it's just a great little sequence. I just adore it because the sound design with the score, with the composition, with the context of the scene is all just firing. Like, that's masterful directing, because it's invisible. It's completely invisible. It just feels obvious, but it's not obvious whenever you're setting up that moment of like, what's the best way to build this sequence out, and to really punch the audience with a little bit of comedy, and the reveal of the writer understanding what's happening. And because now this is the first time Karen Eiffel is understanding that her writing is impacting the real world. And then she picks up the phone, of course. Just now she's a little bit more trepidatious because of what she just experienced at the typewriter. So it's perfectly building out the world. God, yeah.
She's like very in touch with it, like maybe other characters that have been written into a position like this might not be as in touch, with the possibility even that what they're doing could be impacting the real world. But because this whole time for this, over an hour, we've been seeing her just broken because she's so in touch with everything and trying, like, reaching out to get in touch with everything, throwing herself off a building in her mind and going to the, emergency room ward, sitting in the rain, imagining a car crash. All of these, where she's so painfully in touch that, of course, if she were to hit a period on the phone rang and the phone rings, she's going to notice that. She's going to latch onto that, whether it's real or not. And she types it again. And of course, we expect her to do that. And they don't shy away from it. They don't belabor it and something else has to happen in order for her to really spot that. No, she's the type of character that's going to spot that. It's great point.
So cool.
Yeah.
And it's also the convergence of asking that question that you brought up. Who is influencing whom? Is she writing what he's doing, or is she making him do what he's doing through the writing? And that's eye of the beholder question. Like, that's up to the viewer. And I like that that's not really answered. And that's cool. That's a good way to leave everything there. Yeah.
Time is a flat circle, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Just, it also makes you think, what is she going to write after this?
Right. It's like,
she going to keep writing tragedies?
Science fiction now. We're invaded by aliens.
Yeah. And the title is really great too. Stranger Than Fiction. Like it really describes the film. So
it's perfect.
I had a blast watching this and talking about it. It's awesome.
Same. And even the poster is really clever, right? It's the period that's falling off and about to crush Harold Crick. Like, it's a really good combination of good marketing, meeting everything else where it's at, instead of, I don't know, building this something that it isn't to get people into seats. No, you can tell people exactly what this is, and we're going to show up because we got to know how it ends. Yeah. Nice. Well, what are you going to recommend this week?
So gotta stick with Will Ferrell. One of my favorite films from Will Ferrell that I can keep going back to, and it is one of those funny ones, but I'm going to go with Step Brothers. It is so quotable, and it's just him at his peak, and they play really well off each other. So it's just a timeless film for me and my mates going back to it. So Step Brothers.
Nice. I'm going to recommend, so Emma Thompson was also in a movie that was based on a novel. It's called Remains of the Day. It's with Anthony Hopkins. But I'm not going to recommend the movie. I'm going to recommend the book. And that was an interesting one. I read it a few months ago. And it was one of the best written books I've ever read. And I'm not saying I necessarily loved the book, but the writing was just incredible because of the way. Normally when you're reading a book, right, the author is one way or another telling you what the character is thinking and feeling and their beliefs about the world. And this book is not doing that at all. In fact, it's doing the opposite. It's telling you what the character thinks about himself and what he thinks about the world. And it's concealing what he actually feels and thinks about his life, because a lot of it is a life reflected. It's towards the end of his life as a butler, and it's revealing, and you have to really understand that a picture is being painted for you, not one of accuracy. And that is just so cool. Once you have that realization of like, oh, wait, this character is lying to himself. What the hell? And it's just a really cool read once you see that and you start to piece all that. And now the big question is, well, what does he actually think? What is he actually hiding? And those questions you have to read for yourself to understand. And that's cool. Yeah. So I recommend Remains of the Day. It's a lightly challenging. I mean, if you've read whatever, I just finished reading Cormac McCarthy's The Road. And it's not as challenging as that. Yeah.
My God. Hey, you do that to yourself.
Yeah. And it was a nice muggy overcast day yesterday as well. So
perfect.
I just went and stood outside underneath the bridge and
stared off into nothing.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome.
Yeah, so if you're enjoying, nope. Stay tuned for next week. We're going to cover the new movie, The Fall Guy, with Emily Blunt and that Ryan Gosling guy that Todd mentioned earlier. And we're going to see what they're up to with all the falling and all the guys. And so stay tuned for that. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, drop us a review, leave us a note. If there's something you want us to cover, things you enjoy, let us know. If you want to comment on this episode, you can do that at thepistlepodcast.com/strangerthanfiction.
And our quote of the day is from Blaise Pascal. Kind words don't cost much, yet they accomplish much. That's very true. Very true.
I think that's kind of the realization that Karen Eiffel had, because there's this kind of question of in the film that's not overtly stated, right? But there's the life we live and there's the stories we tell about the kind of life we're living, and you have to come to terms with what that is. What life are you actually living? Are you living the life that you wanted? And that's when Harold really gets to live. You know, that's a very on the nose way of saying it, but it's the truth, right? He finally starts living his life, therefore he gets to live his life. And then there's the story that Karen Eiffel realizes about what she's putting out into the world, and how, you know what, maybe it's not as good of writing, but maybe it's a better world for it. Yeah, it doesn't cost a lot, but it gets you a lot.
Yeah, 100%. Love it. Well, I really enjoyed this episode. Great film. I'm glad you like it too. And it's not just me. Yeah, really well done. Kudos to everybody who worked on it. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, review us wherever you get your podcasts, share us with friends. And if there's a film that you'd like to see us pick apart and talk about, please share it with us. Who knows? Maybe one day we will actually cover it. Maybe. We'll give you a shout out. Until next week, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.